The scourge of Rome, Hannibal Barca. He crushed Rome at Cannae, then chose poison over chains.
Late autumn 218 BC. The biting, unforgiving winds of the Alps tore at the exhausted columns of an army that had no logical business being there. Among the treacherous, snow-choked passes, men and horses slipped to their deaths, while 37 massive African elephants struggled through the ice. Leading them was a 29-year-old Carthaginian general who had just achieved the impossible. He had marched tens of thousands of soldiers from the Iberian Peninsula, across the Pyrenees, over the Rhone River, and now through the Alps to strike at the very heart of the Roman Republic. In this single, audacious stroke, Hannibal Barca did not merely declare war, he shattered the geopolitical reality of the ancient Mediterranean.
This crossing remains one of the most celebrated and debated logistical nightmares in human military history, cementing Hannibal as the ultimate architect of strategic shock and awe.
Hannibal Barca was born in 247 BC in the thriving North African metropolis of Carthage, located near modern-day Tunis, Tunisia. He was a Carthaginian statesman and military commander, recognized by historians today as one of the greatest tactical minds to ever live. Operating primarily in the military and political spheres during the late 3rd century BC, Hannibal became the defining figure of the Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BC. His influence is profound because he fundamentally altered the art of war. His battlefield maneuvers, particularly the perfect double envelopment, are still taught in military academies from West Point to Sandhurst over 2,200 years later.
He is considered influential not just for his victories, but for how he brought the seemingly invincible Roman Republic to the absolute brink of annihilation, forcing Rome to evolve into the militaristic empire that would eventually dominate the Western world.
The world into which Hannibal was born in 247 BC was one of deep anxiety and lingering humiliation. Carthage had just lost the First Punic War, 264 to 241 BC, against Rome, a devastating 23-year conflict that stripped the wealthy maritime empire of its crucial territories in Sicily and saddled it with a crippling financial indemnity of 3,200 talents of silver. Hannibal was the eldest son of Hamilcar Barca, Carthage's most successful general from that war. The Barcid family was fiercely aristocratic, immensely wealthy, and aggressively expansionist. Because Carthage's naval supremacy had been broken by Rome, the city's economic conditions were precarious. This prompted Hamilcar to look toward the silver-rich Iberian Peninsula, modern Spain and Portugal, to rebuild Carthaginian wealth and military power. At the age of 9, Hannibal left the cosmopolitan streets of North Africa to accompany his father to Iberia. He did not grow up in the comfortable palaces of the Carthaginian elite. Instead, his childhood and adolescence were spent in the dust and blood of military camps. His education was a synthesis of Hellenistic intellectualism. He was tutored by a Spartan named Sosilas, who taught him Greek, Latin, and history, and the brutal pragmatism of frontier warfare. The most defining influence on Hannibal's character was a singular event that occurred just before he departed for Iberia in 237 BC. According to the Greek historian Polybius, Hamilcar brought his 9-year-old son to a sacrificial altar and demanded that he lay his hand upon the freshly slaughtered victim, swearing a sacred oath never to be a friend to the Romans. While some modern historians debate whether this was Lisuanavant or Roman propaganda designed to explain his lifelong animosity, the psychological reality remains undisputed. Hannibal inherited his father's bitter resentment of Rome's rising hegemony.
In Spain, under the tutelage of his father and later his brother-in-law Hasdrubal the Fair, Hannibal learned the mechanics of empire building. He observed how his father used a blend of ruthless military force and deft diplomatic marriages to forge alliances with Celtiberian tribes. When Hamilcar drowned in 228 BC and Hasdrubal was assassinated by a Celtic servant in 221 BC, Hannibal, steeped in the martial traditions of his family and deeply integrated into a multi-ethnic mercenary army, was perfectly positioned to inherit a massive, fiercely loyal military machine.
Hannibal's transition from a capable subordinate to a supreme commander occurred abruptly in 221 BC. Following the assassination of Hasdrubal the Fair, the Carthaginian army in Iberia bypassed the political establishment back in Carthage and unanimously proclaimed the 26-year-old Hannibal as their commander-in-chief. The Carthaginian Senate, recognizing his extreme popularity and the Barcid family's immense wealth, quickly ratified the decision. Hannibal wasted no time proving his capability. Between 221 and 220 BC, he launched rapid, aggressive campaigns against independent Iberian tribes, such as the Olcades and the Vacaes, demonstrating a terrifying mastery of cavalry tactics and river-crossing ambushes.
However, his rise was not without immense risk. By expanding Carthaginian influence so rapidly, he alarmed the nearby Greek city of Saguntum, an independent coastal settlement that held an alliance with Rome. Hannibal knew that attacking Saguntum would inevitably provoke the Roman Senate, yet he also understood that securing his rear in Iberia was an absolute necessity for the massive war he was already planning.
The true breakthrough moment that propelled Hannibal from a regional commander to a figure of global historical significance was the siege of Saguntum in 219 BC. When Hannibal laid siege to the heavily fortified city, Rome sent envoys demanding he stop immediately. Hannibal ignored them, maintaining the siege for 8 grueling months until the city finally fell. By crossing the Ebro River treaty line, or at least violating the spirit of Roman-Carthaginian agreements, Hannibal essentially forced Rome to declare war in 218 BC, officially starting the Second Punic War. This mattered deeply because it was not a war of random Roman aggression. It was a war engineered by Hannibal on his own terms. It changed his life by committing him to a singular, monumental task, the invasion of Italy. Knowing Rome controlled the Mediterranean waters, he made the unprecedented decision to march his army overland. Leaving Spain with roughly 90,000 infantry and 12,000 cavalry, he emerged in northern Italy in late 218 BC with an estimated 20,000 foot soldiers, 6,000 horsemen, and his 37 surviving elephants. This audacious entry immediately established him as a military terror.
Hannibal's achievements in Italy are defined by a sequence of unmatched tactical masterpieces. In December 218 BC, he achieved his first major victory at the Battle of the Trebia, using freezing weather and a hidden cavalry detachment to slaughter a rash Roman army, leaving roughly 20,000 Romans dead. The following year, in 217 BC, he executed the largest successful ambush in military history at the Battle of Lake Trasimene, trapping and annihilating a Roman army of 25,000 men against the water's edge. But his most significant achievement occurred on August 2, 216 BC, at the Battle of Cannae. Facing a massive Roman army of approximately 80,000 men, Hannibal arranged his much smaller force in a crescent formation. As the Romans pushed into his yielding center, Hannibal's flanks enveloped them, while his heavy cavalry sealed the rear. In a single afternoon, between 50,000 and 70,000 Roman soldiers were slaughtered. It remains one of the bloodiest single days of combat in human history. Following Cannae, a substantial portion of southern Italy defected to Hannibal. He maintained his polyglot army on hostile Italian soil for 15 years without a single mutiny, an astonishing feat of logistical leadership. However, lacking siege equipment, he was finally recalled to North Africa in 203 BC to defend Carthage from a Roman counter-invasion, culminating in his eventual defeat at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC by Scipio Africanus.
Hannibal is most famously recognized for 2 extraordinary feats:
crossing the Alps with elephants, and the tactical perfection of the Battle of Cannae. The Alpine crossing captured the imagination of the ancient world because it defied the natural boundaries of geography, proving that the seemingly impenetrable shield of the Italian peninsula could be breached. The presence of the 37 elephants, terrifying biological tanks of the ancient world, and a layer of cinematic myth to the historical reality, heavily amplified by Roman historians like Livy. In military and academic circles, however, his fame rests entirely on Cannae. The double envelopment or pincer movement he executed there became the holy grail of military strategy. His reputation transcended Carthage because his enemies, the Romans, wrote the history. Roman society, deeply traumatized by the unprecedented carnage he inflicted, elevated him to the status of a nearly supernatural bogeyman. He became famous not because his own people celebrated him in surviving texts, but because the architects of the Roman Empire considered him the greatest existential threat they ever faced.
Hannibal was a man of intense discipline, profound intellect, and calculated pragmatism. Roman sources, though heavily biased, admit that he shared the brutal conditions of his men. He slept on the ground wrapped only in his military cloak and ate the exact same rations as the lowest infantrymen. This physical endurance bred immense loyalty among his diverse mercenary forces, Numidians, Celts, Iberians, and Libyans, who never mutineered against him, despite spending 15 agonizing years in enemy territory.
He was a master of psychological warfare, often disguising himself with wigs to evade assassins, and studying the personalities of opposing Roman generals to exploit their specific psychological flaws, such as the impetuousness of Gaius Flaminius at Trasimene. His core motivation was a blend of familial duty, honoring the Barcid oath, and a strategic belief that Carthage could only survive by dismantling the Roman system of Italian alliances. He was a deeply cultured man, fluent in Greek, Latin, and several tribal languages, successfully blending the political sophistication of a Hellenistic prince with the sheer ruthlessness of a hardened warlord.
Hannibal's life was also deeply marked by failure, controversy, and profound strategic miscalculations. His greatest failure was a political one. He believed that by destroying Roman armies, Rome's Italian allies would defect in mass, causing the Republic to collapse from within. While some cities did defect, the vast core of the Roman alliance system held firm, showcasing a critical flaw in his understanding of Roman civic resilience. After his legendary victory at Cannae, his decision not to march directly on the city of Rome, famously prompting his cavalry commander Hannibal to complain, "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal, but you do not know how to use it," remains heavily debated and criticized by modern historians. Furthermore, he faced intense conflict from his own government. The Carthaginian Senate, led by his political rival Hanno the Great, frequently denied him crucial reinforcements, viewing his war as a personal Barcid vendetta rather than a state enterprise. Ethically, Roman sources accused him of monstrous cruelty and perfidy, the infamous Punica Fidus, or Carthaginian treachery, pointing to his mass execution of prisoners and scorched earth tactics. After his ultimate defeat at Zama in 202 BC, he served as a suffet, magistrate, in Carthage, initiating strict anti-corruption reforms that angered the local oligarchs. Betrayed by his own elites to the Romans, he was forced into a bitter exile in 195 BC, dying as a hunted fugitive rather than a triumphant hero. The impact of Hannibal on the ancient world was catastrophic in the short term and transformative in the long term. In the short term, his Italian campaign severely devastated the economy and demographics of the Italian peninsula. Hundreds of thousands of men died, hundreds of towns were destroyed, and the agricultural landscape of southern Italy was permanently altered.
shifting from small family farms to massive slave-worked estates, latifundia, that would fatally destabilize the Roman Republic centuries later. In the long term, Hannibal inadvertently forged the Roman Empire. To defeat him, Rome was forced to innovate politically and militarily. They developed a professional standing army, revolutionized their logistics, and expanded their reach into Spain and North Africa just to cut off his supply lines. In the realm of military science, his influence is absolutely immortal. Strategies used by modern commanders, from Alfred von Schlieffen's grand plan for World War I to General Norman Schwarzkopf's left hook in the 1991 Gulf War, are direct descendants of Hannibal's maneuvers at Cannae. He proved forever that a smaller, well-led, highly mobile force could annihilate a larger, better-equipped enemy through terrain manipulation and flanking.
Today, Hannibal is remembered not merely as a Carthaginian general, but as the archetype of the brilliant, doomed underdog. His historical reputation is deeply paradoxical. He lost the war, his city was eventually wiped from the face of the earth in 146 BC, and his history was written entirely by his bitter enemies. Yet he is universally revered. Military institutions worldwide continue to study his campaigns. His name is synonymous with audacity, immortalized in the Latin phrase Hannibal ad portas, Hannibal is at the gates, which Romans used for centuries to frighten their children and signal national emergencies.
His image has shifted drastically over time. To the Romans, he was a bloodthirsty monster. To Renaissance scholars, he was a tragic genius. And in modern media and literature, he is often cast as an anti-colonial rebel fighting an expanding imperial machine. The fact that his tactical blueprints survived the total annihilation of his own civilization speaks volumes to the sheer perfection of his military mind.
The life of Hannibal Barca is a profound testament to the awesome power of human will and the tragic limitations of isolated genius. He achieved the absolute pinnacle of tactical perfection, bending geography, severe weather, and the minds of his enemies to his distinct advantage. Yet, his story reveals a harsh, enduring historical truth. Tactical brilliance cannot always overcome structural resilience. Hannibal won the battles, but Rome possessed the robust institutions, the deep manpower, and the stubborn political will to absorb imaginable losses and simply keep fighting. In the end, he was defeated not by a superior mind, but by a superior system.
Dying by his own hand around 183 BC, by ingesting poison in Bithynia to avoid Roman capture, Hannibal's final act was one of supreme defiance. He remains a haunting figure in the annals of history, a man who burned his name into the memory of civilization through sheer, unrelenting audacity, proving that sometimes the greatest legends are born not from ultimate victory, but from a magnificent, terrifying struggle against the inevitable.